Thanks so much, everyone, for watching. We've got an epic lineup tonight of speakers. We've got an awesome panel here. Amazing group of functional doctors, technology, activists for a leap forward in medicine.
You know, our goal is to make it easy for practitioners to learn in community.
This ecosystem that is being set up by the meetup groups, we believe will be the future ecosystem of this evolved primary care network, and it all revolves around you.
Welcome to the Functional Forum. Thanks for joining us in the charge to accelerate the evolution of medicine. Please welcome your host, James Maskell.
Hello and welcome to the Functional Forum. We are here in Las Vegas, Nevada for the annual international conference from the Institute of Functional Medicine. There's over 1,200 attendees on site, hundreds more watching online. Over the next hour, we're going to take you to see some of the best speakers. We're going to hear from attendees and capture the energy of this amazing annual event. It's going to be one hell of a show. Enjoy.
One of the reasons why you have to come to the conference in person is that you can work out who's taller than you in functional medicine. It's Dr. James Carter, Clinical Clinic Center for Functional Medicine. Doc, what have you learned here this weekend that's been interesting for you?
There's so much to learn. The last lecture I just sat in on was talking about something that we see every day. It's anxiety and depression, mental health. And this is where that's in our wheelhouse in functional medicine. We deal with that. We call it an epidemic. I think it's an epidemic, don't you? You know, everyone's anxious, depressed, and getting at the root cause and doing the first things first approach to those patients can be, not only will it change their quality of life immediately, but there's some evidence that it will lower their risk of future neurodegenerative problems. So it's quite exciting.
And why are functional medicine doctors and functional medicine education set up well for solving those issues?
Because it looks at all the different biological systems that are involved with mental health, and including the gut-brain axis, the microbiome, micronutrient deficiencies, sleep disorders, cortisol issues, adrenal glands, and we know this biology, right? So we know it doesn't make sense to immediately give them an SSRI, especially when it's not even going to work on half the people. And there's rebound, there's all sorts of things, tolerance. So I love this approach, and I think it's a challenge to try and figure out how to communicate with patients so that they're ready for that. That they don't just want a quick fix. But if we can get past that hurdle, it's really exciting to make sure we have that component in our practice.
Awesome. It's busy. How much confidence does it give you about the movement to see full conference, all the energy that's here this year?
Oh, I'm confident. It's good medicine. And people want it. Patients want it, and even conventional doctors want it. They want to understand it, so that they can communicate back to their patients. It's one of the things we don't realize is the barrier, but they want to know how to talk to their patients. It's not so much that they're rejecting what we want to do, but they don't want to feel like they're not knowledgeable when they're sitting with their patients. We have to figure that out.
All right, well, thank you. Dr. James Carter leading the way at the Cleveland Clinic Center for Functional Medicine. Doc,
stand on your toes.
All right, here with Dr. Sunjya Schweig, California Center for Functional Medicine. Doc, what are you excited about this weekend?
I was excited to be here. You know what? This is a huge show. This is a huge, so many people are here, so many friends, and I was talking to some other colleagues, and it's one of the biggest shows that I think is around, and it's just great to see this back, this energy back, and post-pandemic, and just excited to connect with people, excited to learn, excited to hear information, excited to speak. I'm going to speak on a panel on AI and wearables on Saturday morning, and
nice.
So yeah, it's exciting.
Give us a little bit of an intake of what you're going to share.
So we're at an incredible inflection point right now with technology, and I think everyone's aware of this in terms of what AI is doing for a lot of different industries. I think there's some fear about it, but there's an incredible opportunity, and I think it's really a situation where we have the opportunity to really increase productivity to an incredible level. And the way that is filtering through medicine and the way that can affect us as practitioners and you as a business person and all of us in this space of being able to help more people and scale medicine, I think has some incredible opportunities. There's some pitfalls that we need to be careful of, but I think that we all need to lean into this, and we need to lean into technology, we need to lean into AI, we need to lean into wearables and data, and I think it's going to really blow up what we can do with functional medicine.
Awesome. Well, Doc, thank you for leading the charge.
My pleasure.
All right,
Good
cheers.
to see you.
All right, I'm here with the healthiest deviant in the whole place, Pilar Gerasimo, founder of Experience Life magazine, author, innovator, agitator. You're speaking this weekend. Tell us what you got going on.
I'm moderating a panel and also participating in the panel on activation to transformation, the journey of the engaged patient.
Okay.
And we're talking about what happens when activated patients come into a functional medicine relationship with a practitioner, usually highly motivated, sometimes by catastrophes, sometimes by inspiring catalysts. And then they begin to make their way through what I kind of call the meat grind of a functional medicine protocol. And they run into obstacles, internal and external. And a lot of times practitioners struggle with how to keep these folks engaged. I heard recently from one of our colleagues here that typically it's only about 3 appointments that the average person manages to get through with a functional practitioner before they basically attrit out the relationship. So we're talking about how to keep their motivations high, how to help them overcome the obstacles involved with lifestyle change, and how to begin shifting their identity away from a person who is sick and diseased and has a problem to someone who's actively interested in maintaining and improving their health for a lifetime.
That's super critical. What have you found has been like the best outcomes for that?
Well, it really depends on the individual person's values or motivations. I think some people, obviously, the catalyst is a catastrophe, bad lab result, heart attack, some sort of horrible experience. But I think in a lot of cases, people do sometimes get inspired by seeing other people in their midst get healthier and happier or have major turnarounds or reverse their chronic illnesses, and then they want that for themselves. In terms of the obstacles, one of the points that I'm trying to make is that, unfortunately, when we put people into functional protocols, they're having to make all of these intense lifestyle changes in the context of the unhealthy culture that got them sick in the first place. And we have to begin addressing the social obstacles as well as the interpersonal.
Well, that's the Healthy Deviant. If you like what you hear from Pilar, check out Healthy Deviant, the book, the movement that you've created. Thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Viva Las Vegas. We are going to kick off this episode with a special interview with Dr. Peter Staats. He gave the opening keynote all about the vagus nerve. If you've been following our content, you know this is something I'm really excited about, and I think it's critical for the future of complex medicine, mind-body medicine, and functional medicine. Let's check in with Dr. Peter Staats. All right, we are here with Dr. Peter Staats. Doc, thanks so much for the keynote yesterday. You keynoted and opened the conference here for the Institute of Functional Medicine. What does it say about the state of vagus nerve research, vagus nerve interest, that topic would lead at a functional medicine conference?
Well, honestly, it's ready for prime time. I think this is two different forces coming together at the same time. Functional medicine, the whole field, it looks at a source of the problem. And vagus nerve is really identifying one of those sources. So it's a great opportunity for the people who are interested in the vagus world and those who are interested in functional medicine to come together and understand that this is now a new tool in their toolbox. As I said the other day, this is not something that should replace functional medicine or nutraceuticals or anything like that, but this is something that's really important, pivotal part of a functional medicine approach.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, one of the things that functional medicine is built on is a systems biology approach. And I would say over the last few years, we've seen, the gut-brain axis, right, be a topic of conversation, and people talk about the gut-brain axis and what it is. And maybe people have thought about that in terms of the microbiome. But actually, what we're talking about is the vagus nerve, right?
Well, again, this fits right in because the gut-brain axis is, in fact, the vagus nerve.
Right.
This is mind-body is, in fact, the vagus nerve, is that conduit between the two. And to ignore that aspect was kind of striking that we've been kind of ignoring what do we mean by the mind-body axis. It's really the function and the status of the vagus nerve and how the vagus nerve will actually help us with many disease entities and potentially cause diseases. So a deeper understanding of the vagus really fits in like a lock and key in the functional medicine world.
Yeah. Well, we've had over the last little while, we've had education on the vagus nerve in our podcast, on the show. We had Dr. Nawaz Habib on. He did a great episode, and he's a great educator. There was something you said in the keynote that I wanted to jump into, which is the idea of vagus insufficiency.
Oh, yeah.
And that was interesting to me because I hadn't heard that terminology before. And I'd love to explain. Can you explain what that is and what happens downstream of vagus insufficiency?
Yeah, I think in medicine we are either lumpers or splitters. And ironically, I think in Western medicine, we've become these splitters, where if you have a pulmonary problem, you have asthma, for example, you go see the pulmonologist. If you have headaches, you go see the neurologist. And if you have anxiety, you see the psychiatrist. But when we stop and we really look at the data, and we really look at the patients that we're seeing in our clinical practices, patients have several problems. They don't have anxiety, depression, and migraines, for example. They have something that we've identified as a latent causation. All of these disorders are linked to the vagus nerve, and it appears that if we rethink things and look at it as a group of symptoms, they're all linked back to the vagus nerve, and if somebody doesn't have adequate vagal tone, they're going to present with numerous types of symptoms. And we showed that first in a statistical analysis of a large data set here in the United States and one in the UK. We identified that these things are not just independent variables that are just popping up and Mrs. Smith happens to have these three things, but they're actually co-linked by what we call a latent causation. And I believe that latent causation in some patients is in fact inadequate vagal tone. So I call that vagus insufficiency. I've talked about that for about 10 years. I've actually not written it up until my new book that's coming out later this year. It's chapter 1, it's called Vagus Insufficiency, which describes what otherwise people have realized is multimorbidity or medically unexplained symptoms. I'm attempting to explain it.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Well, I mean, what struck me as I'm learning more about the vagus nerve this year is just the coordination role, is so mission critical that it might be hard to sort of tell what's being caused by what, given how complex and nuanced the role is and how many different organs and systems it's connected to. Can you just give the audience just a sort of an overview of like the coordination role of the vagus nerve and then I guess the follow-up is like, given that coordination role, does it make sense to work on ways to improve vagus nerve tone earlier on in a treatment course if you're trying to reverse a chronic illness?
Oh, sure. So, one of the problems that I think we face is there's the impact of the vagus nerve is not recognized by Western medicine. The oncologist, or let's just take the kidney doctor. They look at the kidney kind of independently there. And I don't mean to be pejorative of them. They're looking at the organ structure. There are other people looking at the gastrointestinal tract, and they do, endoscopies and scoping and things like that. But they're not really stopping to think about what's the software of that hardware that they're so good at looking at. Yeah. And with every computer system, you have software. Your body is like a computer. Your hardware is the organs in the body, but something is running all those organs, and that's the software, which is really the vagus nerve. And so it is really an extraordinarily complicated system. There are several 100,000 fibers running down both sides of the neck into the gastrointestinal tract, through the lungs, through the heart. They run down, and they are coordinating activity both in reparative phase and fight or flight phase. Those are terms that we've heard of. Yeah. But they're actually doing a tremendous amount to keep your system optimized. So one of the things that can happen, of course, is sometimes the system's not optimized. That's where I believe that the autonomic nervous system can play a very important role, and much more research needs to continue to be performed in this area. But it is really, really important. We're going to get to the point where this second brain is going to be recognized as just as important as the first brain.
Yeah, super cool. I'm interested in obviously, it seems like there's a natural fit to the functional medicine community, given that, really what you're getting educated in when you come to functional medicine is sort of like a super generalism, I think. And if you have a part of the body that is organizing and coordinating function between each of the different organs, that is going to end up in a generalist has to really understand that, right?
Well, what I would say is the functional medicine world is really looking at root cause. Mm-hmm. They don't just give a drug because you have a symptom. They want to understand why you're hurting. And so I'm actually very impressed with the physicians that I've met in the functional medicine world is really trying to understand human physiology and what's wrong with Mrs. Smith right in front of me. And what I would encourage people to think about is the autonomic nervous system can be very helpful, but if it's running awry, it can be one of those root causes. And so this has just got to be at the forefront of everybody's mind when they're seeing patients. We talked about vagus insufficiency with multiple disorders. What's going on there? Of course it can be mold, of course it can be vitamin deficiencies, and that should be part of our toolbox, but it can be non-functioning or poorly functioning autonomic nervous system as well. And that should be just paramount in what we're thinking about when we see these patients.
Yeah, and so, if you take that into consideration, you might think, okay, let's move in complex chronic illness where there's multi-system dysfunction, there must be an argument there for working with the nervous system first, because who knows if you could bring that back up, if you could reduce the vagus insufficiency, would that signaling start a whole body improvement in health. And I think for so many practitioners that I've heard that specialized in this area, people who have trained in nervous system and are up to speed with the vagus nerve, because there are quite a lot of them. They came out of the woodwork when I started doing podcasts on it. They were like, finally, you're talking about this. They'd known about it for a long time. But typically what I've seen is that a patient would come into a functional medicine doctor's office. They would do sort of like the basics, get people doing the sort of lifestyle changes, starting to deal with, some of the core areas of dysfunction. And then if and only if all of that didn't work the way that they thought, then at the end, well, maybe it's a nervous system thing, right? And maybe it's a vagus nerve thing. Whereas, what I guess I'm thinking through this afterwards is like, how can we bring that to the beginning of the treatment arc, especially in areas where, there's obviously, like you mentioned pain and some of the things, but I was actually quite, in your presentation, the range of conditions that you're talking about with this is vast.
Yeah, it is vast, and I've previously called the vagus nerve the Rodney Dangerfields of nerves because it just gets no respect. Yeah. But it is really, really an important nerve that controls a lot of our autonomic function, and it controls a lot of brain function. And very central in the IFM world, or the functional medicine world, is the role of inflammation. And what many people don't realize is that the vagus nerve is command and control of inflammation in the body. Yeah. When inflammation gets out of whack, what sets it back down? It's the vagus nerve. Yeah. And so if you're not adequately tamping down inflammation, a variety of diseases can proceed. And so, again, don't want to make any claims here, but I want you to understand the science of what's going on with this, because the science is really pretty crystal clear now. The science is pretty crystal clear that inflammation is bad, over-inflammation is bad, and that we can tamp it back down with vagus nerve stimulation. So by whatever means we do that, it's really an important part of any practice. Now, you kind of mentioned it in a dichotomy of lifestyle changes and things like that at the very outset. That's part of vagus nerve stimulation. If you are running in a constant stress response and you need to spend a little bit of time activating your parasympathetics with deep breathing, cold water immersion, better diet, other things that are anti-inflammatory like that, that's all activating your vagus. Yeah. And to me, there is a spectrum of how we approach that problem, but everybody should be activating their vagus with deep breathing and mindfulness, meditation, yoga, etc. Those are all really important parts of just a general wellness approach.
Well, I'd love to get into that now, actually, because, and thank you for the mention from stage of VagusFest. We had the first ever one here on Wednesday night, and the intention there is really kind of like you said, is like, how can you make it easy for patients to do something every day that is going to positively affect their vagus nerve and their nervous system balance. And I think, as you said, some of those things we call lifestyle things are also vagus nerve stuff.
Yeah. Well, first of all, congratulations on your VagusFest. And allowing me to walk in and kind of walk and see what everybody was doing was really fascinating. The enthusiasm of the people at VagusFest was just remarkable. I watched groups of 10 over and over and over and over again, never losing enthusiasm, going to all your different stations. Really, it's a very initial step for people to start and kind of understand why the vagus is there. So I was really impressed with you. So thank you for doing that.
Well, hopefully we're going to see this in parks and yoga studios and places around the country as practitioners, use VagusFest as an opportunity to bring people into their functional medicine practice. I want to talk about the vagus nerve stimulation because you've been critically involved in creating, technology that can do that. It's obvious there's an electrical stimulation happening. Tell us about why that fits with nerves and what was the process of bringing that into the world?
Sure. So what you're referring to is about 20 years ago, I co-founded a company that makes really the first cervical non-invasive vagus nerve stimulator out there. And we've spent an enormous amount of research and time developing the right frequencies, the techniques of doing this to activate the vagus. Now, my background, as mentioned, is I'm a pain physician. I started the pain division at Johns Hopkins. I became extraordinarily interested in the field of neuromodulation. Broadly, how does electricity modify disease or symptoms? I became the first anesthesiologist at an academic place to implant spinal cord stimulators and peripheral nerve stimulators. And so my DNA is really embedded in the use of electricity to improve disease. In the late 1990s, I learned my son had peanut allergies, and it became intensely personal for me to how could we figure out a strategy to block the airway from collapsing and not use necessarily epinephrine because that doesn't always work. Are there other strategies out there? And pulling from what I knew in the neuromodulation space and our ability to improve perfusion in the heart, I thought there might be a way to stimulate various parts of the nervous system to improve breathing. And so we embarked on a series of studies to really look at that. That spiderwebbed out from there. Yeah. We found that we could improve breathing in early trials, and the patients with difficulty breathing said, my headache went away. So then we've kind of started looking at the patients with headaches. As we were studying that, patients with PTSD got better, so we're now studying that. And we go down the list here. The physiology takes us in a lot of different directions based on some early work. Now, what I would also say is it's ripe to be done because in the 1990s, we didn't have a good non-invasive approach to stimulate the vagus nerve. 2000s, we didn't really have it. It was actually 2017 when we got the first FDA clearance for a non-invasive device here in the United States. So when you think about that, it's only 7 years old. Yeah. And people are now looking at addiction and Alzheimer's and confusion and wellness to improve cognition, et cetera. It's just exploding right now. So for the people out there, I would suggest that you get involved right now because the field is going to continue to grow logarithmically every year, and get your foundation right now.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that we had an opportunity to do it. I think one of the things that I wanted to share with our audience is I just feel like, what I've seen over the years is that sometimes creating health can feel slow and boring, whereas medicating disease, is easy and people see results quickly. And therefore, as a society, we've all moved towards the quick fix, and we have sort of a quick fix culture. One of the things that really got me inspired about learning more about this and doing that is that with vagus nerve interventions, whether it be humming and meditation and those kind of lifestyle type stuff, or whether it be the vagus nerve stimulation, you feel it. You feel it straight away, you realize that something's happened, and that state change, I feel, is like something that can bring health modalities to sort of play into the culture that we have of wanting quick fixes while doing things that are healthy. And I hope that that can help bring vagus nerve solutions to the forefront, because it can help engage people into doing things for their health that you can feel straight away.
Well, I think the whole world's looking for healthier approaches right now.
Yeah.
So it's a wonderful time, and I hadn't thought about it in that way, but I think you're right. That if you get an immediate reinforcement for doing something, you're likely to do it more frequently.
Well, Doc, I really want to appreciate you for leading the conference yesterday and leading this movement, actually, that you're doing. I feel like I've got a crash course on it this year, and some of the people over the years that have told me about it, I feel like I probably should have paid more attention then. Now that I see, I just guess what I want to finish with. When I started the Functional Forum 11 years ago, it was at one of the things that inspired me to do it was I came to a conference like this and I heard a 2-hour keynote on the microbiome. And at that moment, the microbiome science was so new and no one knew. And I was like, I listened to it. It was Bob Roundtree did a 2-hour talk, and I listened to him and I thought, if this is true, this is going to turn medicine on its head. And I should, and then it obviously is true. And we started making the Functional Forum because we realized, like, here's something that no doctors know about, and it's really exciting. And my feeling is we're at the same moment here with the vagus nerve, where if medicine really understood the implications of the coordination function and all the things that it's doing, that this would be, something that, as medicine understands it, we would turn on its head. And I appreciate you, building the groundwork for that. And I hope that we can unleash unleash wellness at scale.
Well, thank you for that. And I'll just, my final comment was I was reading some of Einstein's old papers. And in 1934, Einstein said that the future physician and the future of medicine is the physician who understands the chemical side of medicine.
Yeah.
And he said the physical side. But what he meant was the electrical side. And it's 90 years later, because it was 1934 when he said this. But 90 years later, I think we're actualizing his view of that the electrical side is just as important as the chemical side, and that we're going to be able to do some really amazing things in the coming years by taking that approach and including electrical medicine as part of what we do.
Wonderful. All right, well, we mentioned a little bit about the VagusFest, and we're going to have some of the highlights from our Wednesday night pre-party, the VagusFest. Check out some of those. Thanks, Dr. Staats.
Thank you, sir. Pleasure.
So since 2016, we have been doing the pre-party for the IFM's annual conference. And it started out with parties and drinking and all the kind of things that you would do before a conference in 2016, 17. But last year we had pickleball because we were in Orlando, Florida. And this year we're in Las Vegas, Nevada. And so we are doing VagusFest. And this is a new concept of participatory education for patients and the community members and practitioners to learn about the vagus nerve and to experience toning the vagus nerve. Let's get into it.
I just want everybody to kind of, let's feel our vagus nerves. Let's use our hands to kind of figure out where they are. So we can start with kind of feeling around on our necks, just underneath our ears. I want you to go down under the ear and feel your SCM muscles that are on either side. And just in front of your SCM muscles, you'll feel your pulse. And if you go there and you feel your pulse, you're within a couple of millimeters. I'm Canadian, by the way, so I'll be doing everything in metric. But if you feel your pulse, you're within a couple of millimeters of your vagus nerve. And this is important because this is where the crux of everything is in your body, and the vagus nerve is there.
But this next technique we're going to do is called a VU breath. And if VUing is uncomfortable, you can hum. So it's about creating that vibration and that frequency. Exhale. Inhale.
Now we're going to stretch the actual nerve. So we're going to start with stretching the left side. You're going to go ear to shoulder on the right ear to right shoulder, as far as you can, and then look up into the left with your eyes as far as you can and hold. It's uncomfortable. You'll notice how it makes your breath deepen. All right, and now slowly bring your head back to neutral. Take your time. You can feel it. We're gonna do the other side now, okay? All right, so left ear, left shoulder. Look up and to the right and hold.
You know, we always get the mix up with Vegas and Vegas with an E, with an A. So it's really wild that we've got VagusFest in Vegas. I think it's a magnificent idea. Anything that we can do to help clinicians understand what patients are going through. So we're really taking clinicians through a very patient-focused experience. Hopefully this will help them relate to their patients and learn ways to better communicate with them.
The main case that involved my perspective of this was myself, actually. I did all of the Western medicine routes to help my positional orthostatic tachycardia. I did actual holistic functional medicine where I dove into infections. I was diagnosed with all these chronic infections, but it wasn't until I actually got to functional neurology and looking at the nervous system that I actually started to heal on a deep level. I've seen this with so many of my patients as well. Typically, I'm one of the last people they come to because they've been and done all the things. And this really is like the missing link that I think it, even for myself, took me years to finally be like, wow, this is really what actually helped me of everything.
I wish everyone knew about the vagus nerve and their particular vagus nerve because it is such a low-hanging fruit, an easy space for them to actually affect and address positively, just simply by taking the time to practice certain important and easy to understand practices. Simple things like the breath, simple things like taking cold showers potentially, or simple things like learning that you're focusing on diaphragmatic breathing and nasal breathing and focusing on exhales. And those are really simple, low-hanging fruits that I wish everybody could understand. They can shift their entire physiology with these simple, easy to practice, easy to perform tasks.
So as you'll see, this experience, the whole experience you're going to feel tonight, is largely scripted and organized in stations. And the purpose of that is that you can easily replicate this experience in your community, in a park or a yoga studio at no cost, no matter what your background. You don't have to be an expert to help your community regulate their nervous system. This time we hope what goes in Vegas comes home with you and transforms your community.
Experience here at VagusFest has been incredible. Used to like very pedagogical kind of didactics, which is fine, but not so much interactive and actionable things to bring to practice on Mondays. And so this is just a great way to build community, which James Maskell, we have to give him a huge shout out for just bringing us all together to really change the medicine we do and the way we do medicine.
Look, in a certain way, it had to be Las Vegas to launch something called VagusFest. We learned a lot. It was a great experience. We're doing another couple of VagusFest coming up in the next week to continue to learn. If you want to join more than 25 clinics that have already said that they want to run a VagusFest in their community this summer to continue our journey, we'd love to hear from you. Please feel free to get in touch.
I'm here with Dr. Margaret Christensen. It is just the end of May, beginning of June. And I know next week you have something pretty exciting. So
I do. Starting June 17th through the 23rd, I have the online hormonal havoc, the COVID fallout, and how to fix it. But we're going to be really looking at all the stuff that's happened since COVID, and unfortunately, all the things that are arising now. Neurological issues, not just hormonal, cardiovascular, children's health, autoimmune issues, mental health issues, and the fertility issues are really horrendous. And so we're going to be discussing all of those and looking at solutions for each one of those, and also asking the question, how did this happen?
Yeah.
How did this happen? We had so many people died unnecessarily. We had early prevention that was blocked. We had so much censorship of those of us who've been in this field for a very long time. And so we're going to be discussing all those issues and giving you some really important help for your clients. Yeah.
Well, I just want to say thank you for doing this and stepping into it. I know that the fallout of everything you're discussing is coming into practices of all the people here anyway.
That's right.
So we have to be up on it to know what to do.
Well, I mean,
in reality about what happened.
And that's the reality, because so many people don't understand what happened and how and what they're seeing, and understanding what all the side effects and complications is from being having spike protein. What doesn't matter where that spike protein came from. And unfortunately, the more doses of spike protein you got, the more likely you're had cardiovascular inflammation, neurological inflammation, autoimmunity.
800% increase in autoimmunity, James. I mean, it's just unbelievable. 900% increase in new onset cases of MS.
You have a history in working with a lot of mold and those kind of issues. Right. Why is that education critical for your understanding of what to do?
Oh, that's so important. So I've been doing biotoxin illness for a very long time. Started with toxic mold and other environmental toxins. That's my own story with my children. And it's the same underlying mechanisms. You're seeing, massive amounts of inflammation, massive amounts of gut damage, massive amounts of mitochondrial impact, suppression of the innate immune system, which is what happens with mold. So the same thing with COVID and with the vaccine. Suppression of the innate immune system and overactive of the adaptive immune system, all the cytokines, all the antibodies. And so I was already very well versed in that for 23 years, my own journey, my family's journey, my patients that I've been taking care of all these years. And so, we knew exactly what to do when all of this started. And unfortunately, our ability, I took really great care of our patients, but my ability to get the word out was silenced. Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is what COVID
Thank you.
And functional medicine advocacy looks like right here.
Woo!
All right, I'm here with Dr. Christopher Young. Doc, what was the most interesting thing you had today?
Well, Dr. Michael Ash was talking about, and I can't believe being as interested in climate as I am and the effects of CO2. For the first time, I heard somebody say, and I know I believe it's real because he's quite serious about science. What he said was, as CO2 levels go up in the atmosphere, all plants are influenced, and one of the ways they're influenced is that they produce internally more carbohydrates. Read carbohydrates, sugars. Yeah. Exactly what people don't need more of. And that's at the expense of, relatively speaking, as carbohydrates go up, minerals and vitamins and proteins relatively are lower. So we're getting more of what we don't need, but we already got from ultra-processed food.
Yeah. One of the best activists here at IFM every year. Doc, thanks for your tip. So, just last month at PLMI, we're here with Dr. Saeed. She brought the most amazing spread. This time we've got the banana bread. We're going to do a live taste test. And we'll sing.
Is it moist? How is it?
Moist and delicious.
Wow, almond flour,
done it again.
oil,
She's done it again.
honey.
I don't know what to say.
Deliciousness.
Thank you. All right, we're here with Dr. Michael Mabry. He is the founder of East Tennessee Health Forum and a man after my own heart. Doc, you're here at the conference.
Yep.
What's your thoughts so far? Why'd you come?
Yeah, these are all my people. Everybody here is passionate about helping people heal. So smart, way ahead of the curve in medicine.
Yeah.
So why not be here?
Tell us a little bit about your efforts to bring functional medicine into your 120 doctor practice.
Well, so far, a friend of mine just last week started doing group visits, and she loved it. And so I got 3 or 4 people now wanting to do more group visits. So automatically, you're helping that many more patients.
Yeah.
And then the health forum's going great. We have an art actually coming up in August. So it's growing.
So if you remember Dr. Mabry from a few functional forums ago, we were there in Johnson City in January as it launched. You've now done a second event, right?
Yes.
What have you got lined up for the summer?
We got just some hanging out time in the summer, but then in August we have a treating root causes of mental health. And I'm hoping to plan, which I need to get your help with in December, dreaming what healthcare can look like in East Tennessee. And having a session on that.
Cool. I love that.
I will pull you in on that.
That'll be great. Well, look, I just have to say, Dr. Mabry has done what I hope that 1,000 of the doctors in this room would do, which is be an advocate for functional medicine in your community by actually building community. And so if you're watching this and you're inspired by this guy, go and do it. They got 90 doctors, 90 practitioners in Johnson City, Tennessee, that only has 70,000 people total. And they drew from all around. That is possible now. This means that the revolution is here. Doc, thanks for leading. Great to see you.
Enjoy seeing you.
One of the topics of this year's conference was muscle and women particularly. And we had an excellent keynote from Dr. Stacy Sims, and we caught up with her for a special interview. Enjoy. All right, we are here for the first time on the evolution of medicine with Dr. Stacy Sims. Welcome.
Thanks, James. Nice to be here.
Really excited to have you here. You know, between you and Dr. Gabrielle Lyon here at IFM, it seems like strong women is a new trend.
Yes, I'm very very excited. Now you can walk into a gym and see women on the lifting platform and not necessarily over the cardio machines. I'm very excited about that.
So one of the talks that you're giving is you're talking about exercise, throughout the lifespan for women, and I'd love to just get into that because I know that every practitioner who watches the Functional Forum and listens to our stuff, they're very interested in helping people doing the fundamentals of health, but it sounds like there's some subtlety that you have uncovered in your work that's important for people to know and practitioners to know as they try and help people get into new healthy behaviors.
Yeah, my tagline is women are not small men, because we know there's sex differences from birth. And when you start looking at like the exercise and nutrition data, it's primarily from men. When you start really digging in, you can see things like women have more oxidative or aerobic carrying capacity muscle fibers. So they're less fatigable. They are more metabolically flexible than men, so ideas of fasted training or low carbohydrate is not ideal. Actually, the brain gets stimulated, there's not enough nutrition, so it kind of backlashes on adaptations. And then we see changes across the lifespan from puberty through reproductive years, perimenopause, postmenopause, and what women should be doing to optimize health. Yeah, that's the big run of the overview of the talk tomorrow.
Yeah, well, let's jump into it because I actually have an 11-year-old daughter right now, and I'd love to just help me understand what's happening.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about the social constructs of how we're treating kids, especially if they're active and sporty, you have co-ed teams, or you have like the boys football team, the girls football team. And as they go through high school, girls might go into the weight room, but they're not actually lifting weights because there's a little bit of a fear there. But the biggest sticking point is we have these huge changes that happen with girls. We see their center of gravity goes from chest area down to the hip area. We see there's a widening of the Q angle, so their biomechanics are changing. So their hips get wider, their shoulder girdle widens, so they don't feel comfortable in these changes because now they're very ungangly when they're running. They are getting injured if they're trying to jump. We see so many different movement patterns that perpetuate injury, and it's because they are not taught how to land properly with new mechanics or run or throw, so they get very discouraged, and this is one of the reasons why girls will drop out of sport. If we look at doing some more functional movement training, like teaching them how to squat with new biomechanics and then adding load, or using a lot of resistance bands to get that muscle brain connection, to then be able to put forward into the movements that they want to get into, we see an incredible uptake, and the girls feel confident and can move forward in their activity and their sport. It's just they get thrown into the same thing as boys, and it's not adaptable. Like the boys can get away with so much because they get taller, they get leaner, their center of gravity doesn't change, they just get stronger. And we need to start thinking about, okay, puberty is the defining point where we really start to see these changes happen. So we need to address that to keep our girls active and in sport.
If you don't keep them active and in sport at that age, is there data to show like what happens to them over the lifetime? Can they catch up, or are they always left with a deficit?
Well, when we're looking at this huge incidence of girls dropping out of activity and out of sport, there's an increase in obesity for teenage girls. We see that there's more depression and mood and anxiety changes. We see that when they get into their 20s, they tend to shun sport because it used to be something they loved, and then they felt really awkward, and so they're not really wanting to get fit or get into activity. That's the generalization. There always are outliers. So if we kind of are proactive and attack it when it starts to change, then we can keep progressing girls, and it doesn't have to be elite sport. It's just any activity. So instead of getting rid of PE, everyone, boys and girls, could do functional movement in PE. It would benefit them both, but would really benefit young girls as they're learning how to move in these new biomechanics.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Well, that kind of is interesting to me as a parent. I'm sure there's a subsection of practitioners that are dealing, pediatrics and doing with juvenile medicine. Most of the practitioners in functional medicine in our world are sort of dealing with, let's say, people who are sort of 40 to 70, right? Who are coming across their first chronic illness. It's not going away the way they want. They're normally having to engineer a new lifestyle change. What's relevant for people in those years?
Well, we have this misconception that everyone ages in a linear fashion.
Okay.
But women don't. We have a distinctive period around 42 or early 40s, and we start to see things like frozen shoulder, plantar fascia problems, poor sleep patterns, changes in body composition, more soft tissue injuries, and it's perimenopause. So if we're looking at perimenopause, that's a defining aging point for women. And we're starting to see more and more uptake in the conversation around menopause, but I'm not telling people, okay, you're in perimenopause, you need to go on hormone therapy, because that's the rhetoric that's coming from the UK and Europe. We look at it as we need to see what each individual is going through and look for an external stress to apply that's going to help the body adapt the way estrogen progesterone used to. So what I mean by that is we know that there are estrogen progesterone receptors in almost every system of the body. And we see that it really affects body composition and lean mass. And what happens is we have a downregulation of our estrogen alpha receptors because we don't have as much estradiol coming. So that decreases the basal cell synthesis stimulus for lean mass, but it also affects actin and myosin, how strong contraction is, and also how much acetylcholine is there for the nerve impulse to jump over to cause that contraction. So if we're looking at doing heavy lifting, it's a central nervous system stimulus. Yep. So instead of relying on estrogen to increase power, strength, and lean mass, we're looking at lifting heavy loads that causes that central nervous system to say, hey, you know what? I need to have a faster nerve conduction. We need more acetylcholine. I need to have a stronger bond with myosin and actin. So let's stimulate myosin to bond stronger to actin. And we need more muscle fiber because we need to be able to lift this load. So by introducing power-based training, so that's if we talk about it in rating perceived exertion, which people tend to now use, we want to look at an 8. So that means if you come into the gym and you can lift a load 8 times, but you could do 2 more with a really good form, we call that 2 reps in reserve, that's an RPE of 8. Or that's what we want, instead of going on 1 rep max percentage, because that changes and it's really hard to do 1 rep max. Yeah. But it's a hard enough stimulus that it's not a metabolic stimulus, like a calorie burning, heart burning kind of thing. It's all about getting the muscle to be activated and have that neural stimulation for preserving and building muscle.
So, if there's practitioners listening to this and they're trying to make an exercise recommendation, because it's one of the pillars of health, so for women in that age group, would you say unilaterally that strength training is what you want to start with, or is it more nuanced than that?
Well, we say in general, women who are perimenopause into postmenopause, the biggest concerns are bone density and body composition. And part of that also is insulin regulation and sensitivity. So the big rock is resistance training, but it's really hard to convince a woman to go to a gym. So we start with phasing in with body weight movements or learning how to move properly to get her comfortable with the idea of resistance training. Because culturally, we see women in their 40s and up are not that comfortable with resistance training if they haven't been exposed to it in earlier years. So if you're looking at someone who's in their 50s and they haven't been in the gym, trying to get them there is going to be pretty difficult. 60s the same. 40s is a little bit easier because it's been more acceptable for women to be in there lifting.
The zeitgeist, right? Yeah. Coming back to what we were saying at the beginning. Do you think that's is that accelerating forward? Are we moving in the right direction, or is it still just a hard thing to overcome?
No, and we are moving in the right direction, and I always credit CrossFit for that. You can either love or hate CrossFit, but what it did is it opened up the idea of Olympic lifts and resistance training availability to the masses. It wasn't just this elite guy bodybuilding thing. It was now, look, men and women are doing the same type of exercise with weights doing Olympic lifting, and it's okay. I can do that too.
Yeah. Well, my own experience with CrossFit is just that, you come for the strength training, but it's the community aspect that I found to like really keep me into it. It's like once I know all the guys and the women there, like there's a sort of a social bond that keeps me coming back.
So what time do you go to class?
6:15.
6:15. I'm the 9:30 class.
Well, 6:15 in summer because then it's already light. In the winter, I'd go in the afternoon.
Yeah, exactly. You're like, it's my
getting
crew.
Up in the dark is not my favorite. One of the things I know you're speaking at here at IFM, and I'm really excited for this conversation to be here because, functional medicine has these pillars at the bottom of the matrix. There's like exercise as a pillar. And I think a lot of times it's just like, oh, exercise is a pillar, go get them. And there's not really a lot of thought as to like, what should we actually do?
Yeah.
And so I'm glad that this conversation is happening now. And I think it's like an evolution of the sort of fundamentals of what we're doing here in functional medicine. But, I'd love to just talk about some of the work you did at Stanford with regard to getting the morbidly obese engaged, because we have a morbid obesity problem and it's only getting worse. And I'd love for you to just share, I know that some people who are watching this might be working with that group, and some specific things that you've learned that can help get those candidates into, something moving in the right direction.
Yeah, so we started with focus groups really trying to understand what are some of the key barriers to entry to exercise. And one of the biggest barriers was sweating, onset of sweat, and being too hot and uncomfortable, not used to that. And they're carrying a lot of insulation. So it would be like us trying to go for a run in a wetsuit, and that just sounds awful. And at Stanford, I had one hand in public health and prevention research and the other in human performance, because I come from a human performance background. I'm a thermoregulation exercise physiologist. So taking the ideas of cooling from the athletic environment and applying it to the obese individual. So we found that if you could remove that barrier of heat, then it improved the want and desire to keep going, as well as having a small group set. So just as we were talking about, we have our crew with CrossFit on our classes. We would have small groups of 5 women who closely bonded because they're all after the same outcome of getting some pre-fitness fitness to then feel comfortable enough to go out on a group walk or to join a gym and get a little bit fitter. So we would have them walking on the treadmill either with hand cooling or eating or drinking an ice slushy, which was just ice water, using the idea of enthalpy of heat, where it's a heat sink. So as they walked and eventually started running, they didn't get as hot. And that was just a real pivotal point where they're like, I'm not that uncomfortable, I can keep going. So extended their ability to last on the treadmill, which then increased their fitness by the nature of exercise. And they really started to enjoy it because they're like, now I see what it's about.
What is a kind of a relationship that a functional medicine clinic should have in order to take this part of medicine seriously? Like, knowing that most doctors are not going to become an expert in this like you are, what is a relationship that they could have in the community that could really allow their patients, they could refer and say, hey, go there, where they know that organization or that kind of practitioner could really get someone moving in the right direction? Is there something like that generally? I know you don't live in America, but like in America or in other ways?
Yeah, one of the things that we're finding is the online community.
Okay.
So I work with a lot of women, like I said, who are afraid to go to the gym, and just by the nature of not being comfortable.
Yeah.
But we have a whole wide variety of different programs that have an open community on Facebook, or they have Zoom. So they're working out together virtually, or they're working out on the same program and can chat in these rooms. So that's one way to open that barrier. And then looking at different community groups, like who has strength training for beginners. There are different Ys here in the States that have that. As much as I personally don't go and like Planet Fitness, I really appreciate what they've done by having the doors open to everybody and having like a circuit and machines, low cost to entry. There's no judgment. There's no bro culture. So people who want to get into that, here's an entry. Let's have a friend to go with us. So there's lots of ways to look at what's available out there and understand who your patient is and what their motivation and drive is. Are they more introverted or are they more social? Okay. So then you can look and say, okay, well, here are some really good online communities and programs that we want to start with. And it's very body weight oriented. You can do this for 10 minutes in your house or work your way up. And here's some that you can bring to the gym, and here's Planet Fitness, or here's the Y. So it's just understanding who your woman is and, again, what her motivation is and what's available to point her in the right direction.
Yeah, awesome. Well, I'm really glad that you're doing this. I'm really glad that this is part of this year's annual conference. I know Gabrielle Lyon personally, but I don't have an interview scheduled with her, and I'd just love to get your take on muscle-centric medicine and that movement and what your hopes are for what she's leading.
I love what she's doing. I come from the physiological background as well, where I look at brain signals to the body, right? And so if we're looking at building muscle, having a good amount of protein, and really focusing on how strong we can be, it takes the idea of calories in, calories out, and all of the crap that we've had from the social constructs, right? It takes it away. So it's putting a new scope on how we are looking at being healthy, and having as much lean mass as possible is so important for just general health. It's not necessarily about strength, that's just the benefit, but it's about metabolic control, cardiovascular control. It's about how you feel, being able to be functional and have balance, and all of those things that allow you to be 80, 90, 100 and still be functional.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I've had a real personal experience of that this year, where my father is in a situation where muscle loss from just being in bed from sort of a dementia-related issue, as his brain function has come back, it's really the muscle that is stopping him from coming back to a normal life, like that muscle loss. And so I'm really recognizing just how mission critical that is in a very acute sort of situation here and that. Well, look, thank you for all the work you're doing. Really grateful to share some of your wisdom here on the evolution of medicine. I'm glad to have this conversation moving, and kick ass this weekend, and I hope you get the message across, and hope the functional medicine community can, one of the reasons why we've built these communities of practitioners across the country, and one of our hopes for it is that you as a practitioner will find, whether it be the online tools, the local gyms, the local areas, as a support network, so that each woman that comes into your practice, you can find the right set of tools to help them get moving in the right way. Dr. Stacy Sims, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me. It's been great.
Great. Thanks so much for tuning in to the Functional Forum. It's been an epic experience here to be in Las Vegas for this conference. The energy is back. Functional medicine is back. The future is functional. We'll see you next time. 3, 2, 1. It's what I thought it would be.